All right. Hello, everyone. Today, what I want to do is go through an example of a literary analysis um, essay and look at maybe the pros and cons, what's working, what's not working. So, I'm going to do this more or less in real time, and hopefully, it won't be a long video. So, this is, in all transparency, an example created by AI, um, and we'll talk about maybe red flags and things that I think AI could improve. Again, for your work, you should not be using any AI, but for the purposes of demonstration, it's much easier for me to generate an AI example, especially if I'm doing a lot of different examples this quarter, which I am. I'm trying to add more examples because students in the past have asked for more. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into this. So the first thing I notice is that the header is right. We've got double spacing throughout. And this is how I would grade it, is kind of look through it. We've got a works cited, so that's good. We've got an AI statement, which again, I always find it interesting that AI will actually generate an AI statement. A red flag here is that this is not what is in the syllabus. And there's also a word count down here, which I don't ask for. So let's go back up to the top and let's look at the intro paragraph again. We've got a title here. You don't need to have a title. It can simply be literary analysis of the lottery. Again, the lottery is not a story that you are able to write about this quarter because we're using it for demonstration purposes. So Shirley Jackson's short story, The Lottery, takes place in a small rural village where people gather once a year to conduct a ritual that ends in a shocking act of violence. At first, the story feels almost cheerful, with villagers chatting and children playing. The setting seems harmless, and Jackson intentionally uses calm, everyday language to describe the scene. However, by the end, the reader learns that the purpose for the annual lottery is to select one person to be stoned to death and the rest by the rest of the community. Jackson uses the surprising twist to explore the dangers of blindly following tradition and how ordinary people can participate in horrific actions when they fail to question long-standing customs. So, good thesis. This is the thesis statement here. I would probably reword it, but the gist here is the moral is, hey, we should question long-standing customs. I would like to know why we need to question those customs. Here in the intro, we don't have specific characters. That's up to the author of the paper. But I do think that having at least one or two specific characters would help to provide a little bit more context depending on what we're talking about later. And again, in full transparency, I have not looked at this example in several weeks since I generated it. Okay, so the other thing I would like to know is why this feels cheerful. I would also move this reveal up. Again, we don't have to worry about spoilers. So I'd like to have more context here as a reader. If I were grading this, I would be asking for more context and perhaps a little bit more clarity and onto why we need to question longstanding customs, since most of our customs, in fact, none that I'm aware of, result in us stoning people to death. So it seems rather extreme. Let's go into the first paragraph. The central message of the lottery is that blindly following tradition without questioning its morality can lead to violence and cruelty. That's an okay topic sentence. Jackson uses the town's unquestioned commitment to the lottery to show how traditions can become dangerous when people stop thinking critically about them. That feels a little bit redundant to me. This would probably be one of the first red flags that this is AI generated for me, is this sort of redundancy and blandness. For example, when Mr. Adams suggests that some villagers have stopped holding the lottery, Old Man Warner replies, quote, "There has always been a lottery, nothing but trouble in that, Jackson." His response shows that some people resist change simply because, quote, that's the way it's always been, instead of considering whether the ritual is wrong. Old Man Warner defends it without thinking. Jackson shows how this type of thinking can lead to harmful consequences when people do not stop to consider what they're actually doing. Okay, we've got a couple issues here that I wish would have been addressed. One is we introduce characters. Mr. Adams. I don't know who Mr. Adams is. Again, we're writing these as if we're writing for an audience that has never read the article or the essay or the story in this case. And so we don't know who Mr. Adams is. We don't know who Old Man Warner is or why he's important. And we don't know why this is actually concerning yet. Okay, so let's go into the next body paragraph. Jackson also uses character reactions to emphasize how normalized the violence has become in the village. When Tessie Hutchinson, again, we don't know who Tessie is at this point, is chosen as the, quote, winner of the lottery, she immediately protests, yelling, "It isn't fair, it isn't right." This is the only time anyone questions the tradition, and it happens only when she becomes the victim. Before that moment, Tessie seemed to be just as willing as everyone else to go along with the ritual. This shows how people often ignore injustices until those injustices directly affect them. It also reflects how society can teach people to accept violence as normal if it's part of a tradition or backed by the majority. This paragraph feels particularly weak to me. Not only do we not know who Tessie is, but we don't know what she's really protesting against. Again, this also seems to be pushing away from the thesis statement, which is about following tradition. And this one goes towards violence and the majority, which is a slightly different topic. I would also like additional evidence here because it's actually not true that this is the only time anyone questions a tradition. In fact, if we look back in the previous paragraph, we actually see somebody question the tradition. So we've got a contradiction here from one paragraph to the next. The next body paragraph, third body paragraph, the peaceful setting and everyday dialogue in the beginning of the story make the ending even more disturbing. I would like to know why or how that connects to the overall thesis. Jackson doesn't describe the stoning in graphic detail, which actually makes it more haunting. Why does that make it more haunting? By using the simple language and calm tone, and she forces the reader to reflect on how easy it is for something horrifying to become normal when it's done regularly and accepted by the community. Again, how regularly is this done? The villagers don't seem evil. They just seem like people who haven't thought deeply about their actions. And again, evidence would help here. This paragraph is weak too, because we have actually zero evidence here. We're saying simple language and calm tone. I'd like to know what that language and calm tone is. Also, we don't have any everyday language or everyday dialogue in this paragraph to show that we're proving our point. In conclusion, so I would delete that. Again, Michael Over's really idiosyncratic rules of writing. I don't think that this is necessary. Shirley Jackson's The Lottery is a powerful warning about the dangers of tradition and the importance of questioning what we accept as normal. Through the character's casual acceptance of violence, again, we haven't had any real explanation or indication or evidence of this casual acceptance of violence. Jackson shows how dangerous it can be to go along with the crowd without thinking. The story encourages readers to consider how many things in our society we just accept because, quote, it's always been that way. Sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that feel closest to real life. Again, I don't know why this story feels close to real life for this student. Again, it's created by AI. So we're lacking some specifics here. Now, the last thing that I would do if I were grading this is I would go back up here to the thesis. Uses this surprising twist to explore the dangers of blindly following tradition and how ordinary people can participate in horrific actions when they fail to question long-standing customs. Again, we kind of stray away from this and we lack evidence. So again, and I've said this in other videos, I believe, that at best, AI is going to generate sort of a C paper. And this isn't a video where I really am trying to drive home a point about AI. But in general, this paper feels like a rough draft. It doesn't feel super polished because we're lacking evidence and we're really lacking that coherence from one paragraph to the next, as I've sort of discussed. And then again, if we go down to the conclusion, the main thing about a conclusion for a literary analysis should be to really explain why the point that we made in our thesis is true and how it applies to daily life. One thing that a student could do in this case would be to point out the fact that this story is from the 1940s. So we're almost 100 years later, 80 years later, and we should be pointing out why the story still resonates. So there you go. I'd say, again, best case scenario, this would be a C type of paper. It is a 5-paragraph essay, but let's just do one last thing, which is look at the page count. So we've got 1, 2. So we're just a little bit over 2 pages. And I think that that is one of the reasons that we're lacking a lot of extra evidence and information, is because it's too short. And in transparency, I believe I asked AI to write a 3 to 5 page paper about this story, knowing that the lottery is available online. But the fact that it's only 2 pages really shows that we're not developing things enough. So when I put in a minimum page count, it's because I think that's the minimum that you could actually do to do the topic or the assignment justice. So there you go. I hope that's helpful. If you have questions, comments, concerns, jokes, memes, or recipes, please do let me know. Otherwise, I will talk to you in the future.